Mike Miller. Mike is an owner-occupier and has tenanted land in Dorset. He farms sheep and beef. He's passionate about grass and animal performance from grass. So it comes as no surprise that his subject is all-winter grazing for sheep. Mike.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure that I'm here today to chat with you about my Nuffield experience and findings. First and foremost, I want to thank my sponsor, David Allen, who sadly passed away recently. And also thank my family and friends, staff at home, who kept the show on the road during my absence, especially my wife, Anna, who's been an absolute star throughout the whole process, and she's here today as well to support me. I thought I'd briefly give you an insight into my background. I'm a dairy farmer's son from North Dorset. Although farming was very much part of everyday life growing up, so was ponies, horses and racing. My father was twice champion point-to-point jockey in the 1970s, and horse racing has always played a huge part in my life. I rode nearly 200 winners as an amateur jockey, and farming has fitted in around that. This is me riding one of my many winners, jumping the last. It's obviously my most stylish picture, that's why it's up today. So when I retired from race riding in 2012, the stark reality that my farming practice were at best average really did hit home. I realised I needed to learn better farming techniques to become a profitable sheep and beef producer. One issue that I regularly struggled with was getting my sheep through the winter months. At the time, I was share farming 1,400 ewes, with no housing available, growing no forage crops and just expensive haylage to give them when we had shortages. My ewes came out of the winter certainly below optimum performance levels, and my grass in a similar state. Things really needed to change. John Vipound from SAC headed an initiative on all-grass wintering, which I became involved in, and with 2 years practicing the techniques and being part of a winter grazing discussion group in our area, I was inspired to continue my thirst for knowledge by applying for a Nuffield Scholarship. A fundamental flaw in my subject title soon became apparent: visiting great locations in the world in their winter. This was a farmers' meeting in a wool shed in New Zealand in July, freezing cold, bobble hats on all day, soup at lunchtime. Not a great experience. The worst storms on memory in Tasmania. My little hire car struggled to stay on the road. And then off to Canada, Northern Ontario, -20 midday. And this is a picture of Brad Noyes and his beef cattle grazing maize. This was the last picture I took this day. My iPad froze. That's a warning. So what have I learned from those hit-and-miss years as I hope for the best sheep farmer? My original grazing strategy was set stock system, turn them into the field at the beginning of the winter. They looked hungry, move them on to the next field. Then we ran out of the grass come February, and then we'd have to bring them in or put them in a sacrifice and feed them extra forage. I'd always looked in with intrigue in the farming press at the dairy farmers with their plate meters and their grazing platforms, thinking it was all some sort of mysterious science that the milkmen knew all about. But guidance from the experts is very simple: to measure, budget and think in dry matter terms. A real must for good grass and management and feed allocation. I met many a junior shepherd in New Zealand who was completely au fait with planning and allocating in dry matting terms. And I just struggled to find those type of people in the UK. My winter grazing strategy changed to measuring the grass available in a paddock, allocating ewes a feed ration per day and then dividing up the field accordingly and moving the sheep through the field. The first year we did this on daily moves, evolving to 3 or 4 day shifts in subsequent years. This is some ewes at home on an all-grass wintering system, and there you can see they're in the middle of the field, intensively stocked on a small shift. So this was on a daily shift at this stage. The advantages of all-winter grazing are numerous. You get even distribution of dung and manure across the field. Grass is evenly grazed and weeds are picked out right to the field edges, and the grass is reset for the spring. Poor swards can be really pulled out and improved by grazing pressure and increased footfall in a small area. And savings can be made on wintering costs using improved grass utilisation. The sheep soon settle into a shift pattern and lie down and rest rather than walking the field and making paths. A trip to Ireland and the excellent Athenry Research Centre in Galway burst my bubble a bit on how great I've become to believe the all-grass wintering system was. A lot of research should be done on the system in Ireland. Tim Keady, a researcher at Athenry, directed me to many research papers, but really got me seeing the grazing system from a different viewpoint. Extending grazing into January can really have a detrimental effect on the sward, resulting in a lower herbage yield in the spring. And further research has suggested year-round grazing can be successfully practiced on low or medium stocking rates, whilst on higher stocking rates of 10 ewes per hectare or 4 ewes per acre, housing period really needs to be included. One study I read pointed to a deterioration in the sward quality, with perennial ryegrass decreasing at the expense of cocksfoot and meadowgrass. But I failed to find further evidence backing this up. In fact, papers in New Zealand are suggesting quite the opposite. So not wholly agreeing with this research and needing some backup and inspiration from the leaders in pastoral farming, the Kiwis, I visited the Southland region. It was actually harder finding sheep farmers who weren't practicing controlled grazing than those that were. Everywhere I drove, there were sheep behind wires, although in certain areas you would have struggled to see any sheep as dairy support seems to be taking over vast tracts of land. I soon discovered the widespread adoption of winter grazing, which is almost a must. With virtually no housing, the sheep must be kept out all winter and fed a proper ration in the field. So how are the farmers overcoming the need to rest pastures for a spell during those winter months? They are growing forage crops, swedes and fodder beet in particular. The loss of dry matter of grass from the grazing area in the spring or summer can be more than made up from at least a 12 tonne of dry matter per hectare forage crop, which is a quality winter feed in a very small area. Farmers found unique places to plant their swedes, like mountaintops. They sprayed and put the seed on by plane, and this is 500 metres, and then it was fenced, and you could see the sheep slowly moving across the mountainside. The farmer joked that a team of Sherpas needed to go out there to move the fence every week. So what have I taken from visiting some top-notch graziers? I've realised I really need to look at my grazing to optimise those key areas of the year where ewe performance is so important. I can't look at my winter grazing in isolation. It needs to dovetail with those two crucial periods. Firstly, tupping in the autumn. A high-quality feed is required to achieve that all-important high scanning percentage. There is no point in trying to build a big feed wedge of deferred grazing going into the winter if you're taking valuable nutrients away from your ewes at this important time. And the second is lambing. Peak lactation is at 3 weeks in a sheep. So we miss hitting the ewe's genetic potential for milk production in this period, we will never get it back. Early lamb growth from mum is so important to a profitable sheep enterprise, where days to slaughter is a real key profit driver. The ewe post-lambing will need to eat up to 20 kilos of fresh grass to reach her potential. Turning ewes onto low sward heights will just not achieve this. Over 2,000 kilograms of dry matter per hectare, or 7 centimetres, will give her a lot better chance. This spring, I've been grazing swards of 2,500 kilos of dry matter per hectare, or around 10 centimetres. And I've been really pleased with the results, with overall lamb growth rates outperforming my previous years. Other advantage are ewes are maintaining good condition and a lower incidence of mastitis. One question I took on with me on my travels, especially to New Zealand, was how to manage my 1,400 ewe flock profitably. Labour costs were just making it unviable. I soon realised that poor infrastructure was to blame. Many farms I visited could manage huge numbers of sheep with low amounts of labour because of well-structured layout based around central yards and large raceways. This was never going to happen back home, with road crossings, and the capital cost would just be too high. So inspired by farmers such as Isaac Creeley here in Northern Ireland with his impressive output per hectare, and research centres in Ireland and New Zealand, I've scaled down to my home farm of 110 hectares, aiming to get maximum output from my great grass-producing former dairy farm. And with a 500 ewe commercial flock and New Zealand Suffolk ewes breeding fit-for-purpose rams. And I keep suckler cows as grazing managers now, rather than profitable animals. The winter is a really great starting point to learn the fundamentals of grass measuring, calculating the ewes' feed demands, and whole farm feed budgeting. That allows us to be proactive rather than reactive to feed shortages and even surpluses. Once mastered, the skills can be used for rotational grazing year-round. I would urge anyone not doing it, just go for it. This picture hangs in my kitchen and really does sum up my 2014 Nuffield Scholarship experience. I'm in Canada. It shows 1,000 ewes waiting to be let into a strip of standing maize. Even though Canada has a very challenging climate to farm sheep in, there are forward-thinking producers making it work. Thinking outside the box, not only are the winters long, they have plenty of predators. Neptune, here at the front, is a guardian dog, and he lives with the sheep 24/7. On a whole different level, I see Neptune as representing those standout individuals which Nuffield gives us the opportunity and confidence to meet. The people who challenge convention and lead the industry forward. Finally, a Twitter conversation I had this week, just after my report was published. I wrote about my report. It's very much aimed at getting sheep farmers just thinking about their grass more. Not enough are. And the reply I got back was, I thought I was. I read the report and realised I need to think a lot more. We start this process thinking we have a really good idea what we're doing, but in truth, as with everything in life, there's a whole lot more to learn. Thank you very much for listening.